Welcome everybody. Our speakers, David Bell, Brad Scott, and Jim Godden is going to join us for the Q&A session. We've had a very big response to this webinar, uh, and recording will be available. But just quickly, a bit about EPD Australasia and where we're at right as of today. As of today, we have 172 Australian and New Zealand businesses with over 3,650 EPDs registered, which is just incredible from where we've come in the last 10 years. We're an integral part of the international EPD system, which has tens of thousands of EPDs registered, and also a key part of the eco platform network of established EPD program operators. You'll notice on each EPD, both those logos, and the Eco Platform EPD verification logo is your sign of quality assurance. So I'll be doing a small presentation after the main speakers and then the Q&A. I'll just like to introduce Brad Scott, who's our first speaker. Now, Brad's a director at Transmutation Proprietary Limited and has 2 EPDs registered with us. So welcome, Brad. I'll just bring up your presentation.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, everyone. So start with transmutation, I suppose, the name. In old alchemical terms, it was when lead was turned to gold. So we've taken that name with transmutation, that we take waste plastic in particular and turn it into what we consider gold, which is very high-end products in the Australian market. If we go to
Can
the
you see
first,
your presentation, Brad?
yes, I can.
Okay.
Next slide would be good. Thanks, Stephen. So what we do is we help recyclers, brands, manufacturers, consumers, and the environment. And how we do this, we make first-class products. So every product that we've made, we consider, and of course we're biased, but we consider it the top of its class in that particular field. We lower the carbon footprints by making everything out of 100% recycle when we can, but at least above 90%. So we do have to do a few things chemically to make them into the top class products. We're giving customers authenticated Scope 3 data, and that'll be a big part of what I talk about with EPDs. We're keeping hundreds of tons of plastic out of landfill, and we're just scaling it up as well at the moment. We're also about education, so we're elevating the recycling and manufacturing into high quality sectors using recycled materials. So we're really trying to portray recycled materials can be used to get very highly accredited and standardized products. Next slide, please. So while we're a bit different, we use chemistry and innovation to re-engineer hard to recycle plastics into viable next generation products. So we're basically taking stuff that other recyclers won't take and then formulating that into to mixes that get into the high-end bracket. So we're using high-impact polystyrene. We're using expanded polystyrene. We've got powder coating waste from Dulux. I have a patent pending on the process I use there. We also tragic plastics, which we define as beach plastics, e-waste plastics, soft wrappers, PVC, stuff that other traditional recyclers won't even touch. Next slide, please. So why we're an ESG facing company, it's just a belief of mine that any product you want to put into the market today and you're saying this is the top of its class in 2026 must have ESG credentials about it, must have life cycle analysis, must have EPDs. That's just my personal belief, that I don't think you're serious about claiming a product is best of its class if it doesn't have this sort of accreditation and credentials that come with it. So our value proposition for our products are they made from something that the world currently doesn't value, and then we transmute them into the best product in their class. So that's via design, the strength of the product, the value, the sustainability credentials, the transparency of where all the materials come from, and also the sovereign manufacturing standards that we adhere to. So why we use EPDs in this space? It's one of our tools, if you like, that give our products that sort of transparency, the sustainability credentials, and that Scope 3 data that I was talking about for our customers who are larger sort of tier ones and anyone who needs to start reporting on all of their Scope 3 emissions. Then we're a supplier that can support, give you a product straight away, and you can just go to the website and get that off via the EPD. Next slide, please. So in our little toolkit, firstly, we have accreditations we use. So we're Australian owned and operated. We have both of the Australian owned sort of symbols. We'll also be part of the Remade in Australia campaign, which will be out later this year. We have full transparency on our products, so QR codes that take you to a website to show you where everything, each stage of the process of manufacturing, the sourcing, the manufacturing, the distribution, where it all comes from. We have geek accreditation, so Good Environmental Choice Australia on our bar chairs, and also getting that on our wheel stops and on the post-prime plastic itself. And of course, EPD. So that's the main thing. All of our products will have an EPD. So we have two at the moment, and the other three products coming online are all through the process. So we should have them by March this year. Next slide, thank you. So another one is our quality and environmental systems. So we're ISO accredited, 9001, 14001, 45001. We're also a member of the UN Global Compact. So you can see from a small business point of view, we are highly accredited in all of these fields. Next slide, please. And of course, business awards give us credibility. So the AMP Tomorrow Maker back in 2020, Small Business Award 21. Big highlight for us was the Telstra Best of Business Award, where we won the National Embracing Innovation category in 2024. And then we had the SIMPAC Award last year for our life cycle design. So I'll quickly go through some of the products. The post-prime plastic, next slide, thanks, Stephen. So this is the resin that we're making out of Dulux powder coating waste and agricultural waste, mainly from the Victorian farmlands at the moment. So that's Geeker accredited, that resin. It's got an EPD, it's got a QR code telling you where everything's made, and we have a patent pending on the process I use to put all that together. So that's the base resin material that most of our products are made from. Next one, the bar chairs. So we have the 4025 and we also have the 5065 bar chair. So why these are best in their class is firstly they're made out of our post-prime plastic, so they're 96% recycled. They're the strongest in their class, so we beefed up the design and also the material itself is very strong, so 200 kilogram rated. They're Geeker accredited. They're the only one I can find in the system at the moment that has an EPD. We have QR codes on all our boxes. We're the only ones providing bar chairs in recycled cardboard boxes. Every one of my competition gives it to you in a plastic bag. So things like that make this, as far as we're concerned, the leader in its market. And currently these are going into to John Holland projects. Next one, we're pretty excited about too. So this is the wheel stop. And again, this is getting its EPD. It should come in March. But this is a digital wheel stop, first of its kind as well. So the company Park Agility, they use this as an Internet of Things casing. So they put their technology inside of this wheel stop. We've designed this as a bespoke item for them. All of their technology fits inside this wheel stop very neatly. The first 2,000 of these we've manufactured and they're sitting at the Western Sydney Airport as we speak, and they'll be installed in the car park there. We also sell them as a standard wheel stop. So Transmutation itself sells them as a standard wheel stop, and then Park Agility can digitize them down the track if you want to have a digital car park or some of your car parking spaces digitized. So this material is our post-prime plastic. You've got your high impact qualities, you've got your UV rating, all made out of recycled materials. Very consistent. We can do hundreds of tons of this in a consistent manner. So we're getting a Geeker accreditation on this as well. Next one. So this is also our reconstituted limestone blocks. So they're made with limestone, cement, shouldn't say concrete, cement and Resonate. So Resonate's another product that we're bringing back into the market as well. So it's using the e-waste and the very hard to recycle plastics, if you like, and making a synthetic aggregate. So that synthetic aggregate, we're actually converting the plastic into a mineral polymer. So what that means is when you recycle these blocks, when they're finished with their life, then that can be a recycled aggregate back into the system. And we don't have to further sort of recycle that to have contamination out of it. So it's pretty exciting technology from my point of view, whereas we're not just burying plastic into infrastructure, we're actually putting it in a format where it can be recycled further in the future. So again, we'll be getting EPDs for these parts as well. Resonate has an EPD overseas, and we'll get the Australian version of the EPD for Australia. So just quickly in conclusion, last slide. So EPDs are definitely one of the major tools that we use at Transmutation to show the quality accreditation transparency of the products that we make. And we want to make the top products in our class. That's the niche that we need to sit into because we're a small business. So we're looking for products that stand out in the crowd, if you like. And EPD are definitely the major tool that we use in that environment. Thanks, Stephen.
Oh, thanks very much, Brad. Thanks very much. Oh, we've actually I've been remiss. I should have mentioned if you've got a question for any of our presenters or about circular economy and EPDs general, please use the Q&A function. I see there's a couple of questions already come through. So, Brad, from David O'Connell there, what does the technology do in these wheel stops?
Yeah, so there's a range of sensors that the Park Agility use. So they have anything from LiDAR, sort of radar. They also have cameras. So depending on what you want the wheel stop to do, you can take a picture of the license plate, identify what car, who the owner, all those sorts of things, as well as just, okay, there's a car there and that's how long it was there for. So, for example, disabled car parks or EV car parks or anything like that, you can coordinate with the technology to say this car shouldn't be here, it's illegally parked, and it goes and rings the tow truck for you. So, Big Brother's coming.
Put that wheel clamp on automatically.
Yeah, it's things like that. So hybrid car parks are a big use of this, where you might have your EV car parks, your disabled car parks with
Yeah,
technology, and the other ones just might be standard.
yeah, right. Thanks very much. Another question there. Can you, from John Delavia, can you recycle acrylic solid surface?
We can actually. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, we sort of
Um,
we're now in the banding where we can take pretty much everything, including the thermosets, and do something with it.
Impressive. And another question is, resin 8 limestone blocks, are they available in Australia yet?
Certainly, they're definitely available. So, Cape Jaffa Limestone are the local manufacturers just near Robe, where I come from, on the Limestone Coast in South Australia. So they make them. We have added the Resonate material to their product. So all of their range is going to be an eco range, if you like. So it makes the block lighter, stronger, better thermally, better acoustically, and better environmentally. So they were very keen to come on board. So yeah, they're definitely available and also a proven product. So most of the marinas around Cape Jaffa and Robe are actually made of this stuff.
Yeah, right. Okay. Good to know. It's been in use. That's fantastic in the Australian environment. Okay, that's the questions we've got at the moment. Thanks very much, Brad. I'll move on to David now, and you'll join us for the Q&A, of course. Thank you. Where am I? Just here. I'll just move over. Yep, yep, yep. We are. Just a moment. Uh, can you see the next presentation? No?
No, not yet.
Yep. Okay, David.
Hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon from wherever you're joining us from. Next slide, Stephen. I can just see myself at this point in time. Here we go. Thank you kindly. And as I said, good morning or good afternoon from wherever you're joining us from. Thank you kindly, certainly to EPD Australasia. I can't see myself, Stephen. That's probably a good thing, but you're the one on video. But I will keep talking while we solve that little
Okay.
issue. But yes, thank you kindly, EPD Australasia, for joining and presenting this opportunity for me to talk to you all. As you can see there, these are the topics that I am going to go through in my little piece, and I'll build upon some of the points that Brad has talked about as well. But I'll take you on a bit of a journey as it is through EPD. Sorry, back one, please, Stephen. Through who is InfraBuild, a little bit of a talk around who our and how our EPD journey has come around, because we've had EPDs in the market for a fair while, and then dive into recycled content, particularly from our point of view as a steelmaker, the Material Circularity Indicator journey that we have been on, and indeed then start to link how that has joined the circularity metrics into sustainability ratings tools. Next one, please, Stephen, if you can. So InfraBuild, fundamentally, we're an Australian-based steel recycler, steel manufacturer and steel distributor. We collect around 1.4 million tonnes of scrap each year. And what you're looking at now is one of our two scrap yards. This is the one at our Sydney steel mill at Rooty Hill. We have two electric arc furnace mills, one in Sydney and one at Laverton in Melbourne. And this holds at its peak around 20,000 tonnes of scrap steel, which takes us about 8 days to go through. So we turn that over fairly quickly. Next slide, please, Stephen. So we take scrap at about 90 tonnes at a time in that large bucket you can see on the left-hand side, and we put that into the electric arc furnace, which is the glowing part on the right. Those are the actual electrodes that put the electricity into the electric arc furnace, and we take that 90 tonnes of scrap steel with some other additives and melt that down into new high quality steel. Next slide, please. Stephen, thank you. That comes out as billet in our billet caster. So again, this is at our Sydney steel mill. You can see two of the, or even three there, of the billets. So we produce 4 billets in a strand in Sydney and 5 at Laverton. And that cycle from scrap steel to billet takes around 45 to 50 minutes each time around, and we do that practically 24/7, 365 days a year to turn that into a myriad of products, as I said, all generated from 100% scrap. Collected in the market, and I'll talk to that in a moment, with no loss of quality, no loss of strength, and indeed in some instances we actually increase the strength from the scrap input to the finished steel section. Next one, please, Stephen. And the audience still can't see me, for better or worse. Where does all that steel go? So as I said, we make around 1.4 million tonnes of steel ourselves. We also utilise steel from other steel makers, turn that into particularly tubular steel, but we're very much focused on the construction market. So around 80% of what we make goes into those first three areas: construction, the growing renewables sector, and also the industrial and manufacturing market. We also put products into specialty products, very specialty applications in both the mining and agricultural segment, but collectively we would sell and make around just over 2 million tonnes of steel. Next one, please, Stephen. Thank you. So in terms of our EPD journey, we have had EPDs in the market since 2016. So we've had 10 years of learning and understanding, firstly, how to develop and launch and get EPDs out into the market, but also increasingly how they are utilised by our customers and stakeholders. So as you've got there, our first ones came out in 2016, back when we were known as One Steel. We did a major update when we needed to across the 5-year cycle of the validity of an EPD in 2020, and we've had some other interim updates as we've added additional products into the suite that are covered by EPDs. So our current suite of EPDs, 8 in all, that were published practically the week before Christmas last year, all done to EN 15804 plus A2, ISO 14025. Of course, effectively though, 8 EPDs covering that range of reinforcing bar, reinforcing mesh, and what we call merchant bar, so our smaller angles, channels, and the like. And as I said, over that journey of having EPDs, what's been interesting and exciting is how they've evolved over time to become now, and as Brad spoke to this, not only a design tool, but also, very much enshrined in specifications in contracts, so requirements to have products with EPDs, so that Tier 1, Tier 2 and beyond contractors, their sustainability professionals can use them to measure embodied carbon. The design fraternity can use them to understand how to design out embodied carbon, and indeed how that can help support the sustainability rating tools that I'll come to in a moment. I'd also echo Brad's comments around having those other certifications. So we indeed also have GECA certification for our reinforcing bar, reinforcing mesh products. Those are very important in terms of supporting the likes of both the Green Star and the IS rating tools. And certainly I think, we're all across the reasons for having EPDs here. You'd be a very educated and informed audience. But beyond just global warming potential, beyond recycled content, is we're starting to see the emergence and the use of those other metrics around MCI. Need to pop back to presenting. Oh, there, Stephen, sorry. The use of the MCI metrics starting to come through in their use as a design tool, as a specification tool, and thank you kindly, and as an ability to understand the circularity of the entire project. So a couple of links there is where you'll find our EPDs, either off our website or, of course, the one source of the truth, EPD Australasia. Next slide, please. So diving into recycled content, I'm going to start with a little bit of what it is and importantly what it isn't. And I'll come to this from the viewpoint of steel, but it also applies to many other materials. But from a steel point of view, when we make steel, as I spoke about a bit earlier, we use an electric arc furnace. We put in, as I said, around 90 tonnes of scrap each time for each heat of steel, as we call it, but each individual recipe. And we use typically, as do most EAF-based steel mills, they'll use 100% scrap steel as the feed for the ferrous or iron material that goes into that. Yes, there are other additives, fluxes and limes, alloys and the like that are used, but from an iron point of view, the feed comes from scrap steel, and it's generally 100% scrap steel. The other traditional way of making steel, apart from EAFs, is through the blast furnace basic oxygen steel making process, which use iron ore as the primary ferrous or iron feed, but do use anywhere from 5 to around 30% of scrap as part of that feed as well. Now, where does all this scrap steel come from? That's a fascinating question, and it's a very long question, but fundamentally, anywhere and everywhere. It can come from industry, it comes from demolition, it comes from manufacturing offcuts, it comes from processing, it comes from steel making offcuts, right through to domestic supply from, quite literally, mums and dads bringing a load of scrap steel to a scrappy that will wind up back in the supply chain. Australia is a net generator of scrap in that we generate more scrap than we use domestically. So we do send some scrap overseas, which is a good thing for us and other steel makers in that we have that security of scrap in the Australian market. But here I'm getting to the point of not all scrap steel can be classified as recycled content. So recycled content is a defined term within ISO 14021, which under the realm and the requirements of our GECA certification, and also for EPDs, we are bound to follow, which is a very good thing. And effectively scrap, and I'm talking, as I said, particularly about steel, but all scrap materials come from one of three sources that we've got there. They're either a post-consumer, so the material has been used, it's gone out to its intended use, and it's at its end of use phase, it comes back into a recycling channel. A pre-consumer source where material has gone out to perhaps a manufacturing market, some of it gets turned back into an offcut, it doesn't go to its final use, it goes back into the recycling channel. This is also recycled content, but it's called pre-consumer content. And then there's the third part, excluded. Excluded is where the scrap is generated, where the resource, the waste is generated, but it doesn't make it through to the point at which it can be called pre-consumer. So there is always a proportion for us, indeed for steel, where we will have a portion of steel that doesn't make it to a point where it can be called pre-consumer. So that is excluded in terms of it. Next one, please, Steve. So our approach has been, and we've done this for many, many years because recycled content is one of those recognised criteria in both the Green Star and IS rating tools, where we've published data around recycled content. With our new EPDs, as I said, that were launched only last December, we've taken now the approach where we will report both pre and post-consumer values and indeed a total as part of our EPD. The fantastic part of that is it's independently modelled by ThinkStep ANZ, who do our EPD work for us, but it's independently modelled as part of the EPD process. It's done to recognise standard and it's third-party verified as well. So for us, that brings that extra level of credence, transparency, and compliance to the market that uses this to make those design decisions, to make procurement and contractual choices. And as I've got there, I've just put there the total recycled content. So the sum of the pre and post consumer values for some of the products covered. As you see, we're nudging mid 80s through to mid 90% recycled content, which is fantastic for us from two viewpoints. One, as I said, it gives the market confidence in the numbers that they're using, but it also provides a bit of a hotspot. It lets us show where that other 13 to 5% can be gained and how we can increase that closer to the utopia of 100%. The part I would say here, and this is particularly for steel, is be very wary of any claims of 100% recycled content. Any steel making process at the electric arc furnace, at a blast furnace level, will generate material that will not wind up in the manufacturing channel. That's just the nature of the beast for a multitude of reasons, but that is called that excluded content. So if there is a steel maker out there that is saying their steel has 100% recycled content, you should look at that very, very carefully and use that data very, very carefully. Next one, please, Stephen. The evolution of this from a recycled content, and this has been a fantastic journey, is the approach to measure circularity. And there are a multitude of ways, but from our point of view, we've got on board with the Materials Circularity Indicators and have for a fair while, because it brings that more holistic approach to circularity. Instead of just looking at the recycled content as an input to a finished material, it starts to talk to the flow of both virgin feedstock and recycled feedstock and how that travels through the life of a product or the life of the material through its use phase and indeed what happens at end of life and how much winds up in landfill, what energy is used for that, and so this is a very simplistic representation, courtesy of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, but it talks very much to why circularity is becoming more and more predominant and more utilised, and it's something given the way that we make steel, something we're very excited about. Next one, please, Stephen. So our approach around MCIs has been that for a long time it was represented numerically. It was either a value between 0.1 and 1. Something that was 0.1 was fully linear. A value of 1.0 represents full circularity. More recently, that's moved to representing it as a percentage, which for the bulk of the market makes a little bit more sense. But again, from 0 being fully linear, 100% being fully circular, and ultimately you can draw from that, the higher the number, the more circular that a material is. As I said, we've been on this journey for quite a while. We first dabbled and published one MCI data point for one product back in 2018. We evolved that to cover all of our EPDs in 2020. And for our current EPDs, as I said, launched last December, we also now have updated MCI metrics for those. And we talk to those as a percentage now instead of as the number between 0.1 and 1. But again, you start to get the sense around how highly circular the products that we make through our electric arc furnaces are in taking it as a full life cycle approach. The 2 dot points I've got there on the bottom of the slide bear it out. From our point of view, it drives an awareness and an understanding of where those gaps are, how we can get from 85.9, 89.9, how we can increase that into the 90s. Where are the gaps? Where are the hotspots that give us, from a manufacturing point of view, the ability to shift that dial even further? And increasingly and importantly, MCI metrics are actually being adopted in the major Australian sustainability rating tools. Next slide, please, Stephen. Thank you. So just for my last slide, I just want to talk through those and give you a sense of how they're starting to be utilised. But going back a step, globally, and including Australia, unfortunately, the measures of circularity are low, quite low actually, and over recent years, those numbers have actually been decreasing rather than increasing. The drive of the two main, if I can talk to those, Australian-based sustainability rating tools are actually looking to increase that and drive it through the use and the uptake within their respective tools. Many great reasons for that. First off, as I've got there, it drives the use of secondary products. It creates an increase in the use of reuse and recycling channels that drive those resources, not to call them a waste, but they're actually a resource, away from landfill and into new uses, which provides an economic value. So scrap steel is a highly valued product in the market, and part of the drivers for diverting steel away from landfill is the economic value that it can return. Increasing circularity also decreases the use of primary or non-renewable resources, both materials and energy, including water, as well as the materials itself, and ultimately can help deliver enhanced sustainability outcomes. So it can provide a lower global warming potential. It can provide products that deliver increased circularity and indeed recognition within those rating tools. So just to finish up, from the ISCs, the Infrastructure Sustainability Council's rating tool, they already reward the use of products with MCIs, which is fantastic and have been for a little while. And for those of you who are across the Green Star Buildings tool by the GBCA, currently rewards circularity as part of their leadership challenge, which is great. But for those of you across what revision B of the Responsible Products Framework is looking like it will become, there is indeed a lot of discussion and opportunity that circularity will be rewarded, and the use of products with circularity metrics, including MCI, will be enshrined and recognised within the revision B framework. So thank you kindly for that opportunity to talk you through. Happy to take some questions now, Stephen, or
Yeah, I think so.
deal with
There's
them
a few
later.
questions come through, David. Thank you very much. Can you see yourself now?
I can't, but maybe others can.
Okay. Well, I've been reassured that everyone can see you, so through the chat function, I'm not sure what's happening there. But I've got a couple of questions. There's quite a few questions for you. Is there a plan to include more details on the MCI score provided in your recent EPD? I mean, the MCI inputs that made your product achieve 78% MCI.
Uh,
Yeah.
yes, so there's certainly some information within the EPDs themselves. We have other products that I haven't talked to here that have lower MCI values, so certainly not saying that those numbers are representative. I just picked some of the best-in-class ones and put those up there.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because this questionnaire is I've got the name there, but those inputs will help us get the right score for the building level circularity calculation for Green Star. So he's using those MCI indicators for the whole building side of things.
Okay. I see
Yeah.
that's anonymous attendee. Maybe they can reach out to me directly, and happy to have a
Yeah.
conversation offline on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can see the next question there. Your website mentions a carbon intensity for the Sense 600 product,
Oh,
but
yes. Yep. Later
as a
mentions 982. Yes, certainly. So Sense 600 is a product we've had out in the market only for a couple of years. This is a really quick answer, but again, happy to have this conversation online. But it's a higher grade product made in smaller diameters, and effectively it delivers a mass reduction of 16.7%. And by virtue of that, in comparing it to a standard design using 500 grade, we represent two different GWPs. So if you open the EPD, you'll see a number of 982. But if you compare it to 500 grade, sorry, the tons of 500 grade material, it has an effective GWP of 818 kilogram
Right.
CO2 per ton of steel. So they're two different ways of getting to the same answer. But that is, yeah, they, as I said, we represent two different numbers just to explain to the market that Cent 600 gives you both a mass reduction and an embodied carbon reduction. And that's, yeah, two of its key advantages.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one last question before, and I'll come back
Mm.
to the other questions in the Q&A. Can you give a specific example of what be considered excluded recyclate? I think you answered that. That was internal scrap,
Yeah,
is
look,
correct?
I'll
Or,
give one.
yeah.
One by example is through that caster, we are making a multitude of different steel grades. So it's a continuous casting process where we move from one grade of steel to another grade of steel. There'll be a mix in the middle where we'll have a mix of the grade that had originally come out, the new grade that's being cast in behind that. So there'll be a transition period, and that transition steel will be cut out, and that will go back into the EAF making process. So we keep that all on site, we break it up, it goes back in as part of our scrap supply. But that would be one example of scrap that would be called excluded and could not be counted as recycled content.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, David. We'll talk to you.
Pleasure.
We've got a few more questions there for in the Q&A section, so thank you very much. Um, I just want to touch on a few things myself, and how circularity is included within EPDs themselves. I mean, EPDs are very information dense documents, so I think it will help the participants to understand a bit more about how circularity is incorporated into EPDs. They're a core part of EPDs. But construction products, um, it's a mandatory is to have um, information and data about the product stage of production, as David and Brad have very eloquently illustrated, but also included in all EPDs, unless they're exempt, and you'll see the exemption there. You've got to include end of life stage scenarios. What happens at the uh, if material gets reused, recycled, or disposed of at the end of life. So that's a mandatory component of every EPD is to have the impacts of that stage of life. What's also mandatory, we report on a lot of indicators within EPDs, or manufacturers declare a lot of impacts, more than 40 indicators across that life cycle stages. Climate change is obviously the big one, but there's a multitude of circularity indicators. For example, reuse of use of secondary materials, use of secondary fuels that might be renewable or non-renewable, the components for reuse uh, at the end of the life, and the materials for recycling and energy recovery. Now, those are all mandatory indicators, so they're all included in all EPDs that are developed to the new standards. And as David has just illustrated, the material circularity indicator, that's an optional thing which is becoming more common. And pre and post consumer recycled content, sorry, that's a bit incorrect. That actually post consumer content is a mandatory requirement now, but to do that further into pre and post, as David illustrates, that's still optional. If you want to search for EPDs that have material circularity indicator, it's as simple as typing in MCI into our EPD database search engine. There's 40 EPDs from 7 companies there currently, and we've got a lot of people who are developing those EPDs with that MCI indicator now coming on stream. So keep your eye out. As I said, it's now mandatory to include the post-consumer recycled content within your EPD. So this is from post-prime plastics EPD, where the plastic component of those products have been declared their post-consumer recycled content there. So that's a mandatory component of all EPDs now in the content declaration part of the EPD. Um, and obviously, EPDs now required in an advantage in the green markets. They're recognised for their multiple indicators that they provide for Green Star, Infrastructure Sustainability Council, um, in Australia and New Zealand. And just a reminder that Green Star now rewards EPDs with 7 RPV value points in the responsible products framework. And there's a multitude of other sustainability rating schemes and regulations that recognise EPDs throughout the world. So we'll now move on to the Q&A section of our webinar. I'll just stop sharing here if everyone wants to come up now. We've got a few questions here. Um, uh, Maybe I'll introduce Jim here. These are the questions that were pre-submitted when people registered. So we're going to run through these first and then go on to the Q&A section. And here's a bit of a curly one. Discuss the MCI shortfall and limitation of being used as score to compare products. Jim, we've had a bit of a chat about this question. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, we have. I mean, I think the probably the biggest challenge is always comes down to data, right? So the MCI includes essentially three components. There's the inflows to the product, the outflows from the product, and what happens in the middle in terms of utility. And the biggest sort of sources of uncertainty when you declare the MCI for a product at point of manufacture is what's going to happen to the product at the end of its life, and how long is it going to last. But there are some pretty standard ways of addressing that by adopting a conservative approach in the first place, and also by referencing a common set of expected end of life scenarios for materials, whether that's regionally or nationally. So there are ways around that, but that's kind of tied in with the how you apply the MCI and the data you use, particularly around those downstream effects.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the things we discussed is within the EPDs themselves, because they're verified, we're using actual data to develop these MCI indicators.
Hmm.
And there are tools there to give you a general guidance. Is that right?
Yeah, so the advice says with in applying the MCI as with EPDs is to use actual data. Uh, And there are a variety of tools that use the MCI. Most of the major LCA packages have adopted the MCI. There's also a free tool on the ThinkStep website if you want to play around with the MCI. There's a pro version being released in the next week or so too, and actually there's a 20% discount if you want to go and buy that today. That's currently available. But the using the metric itself is fairly straightforward. It aligns very nicely with the inputs of an EPD, and deliberately so. So when the Ellen MacArthur Foundation developed the MCI, there was a very deliberate move to make sure that the data requirements for the MCI weren't going to be too much of a burden. And so to deliberately align those inputs with the data that you would need for an LCA. So there's very little additional information that's needed. A lot of it comes down to things like traceability of recycled content, which David mentioned earlier. Having that verified recycled content as part of the backdrop for calculating the MCI is really important, and adds a lot more validity to the calculations. The same goes for renewable biological materials. If you're sourcing FSC content for your products, being able to evidence that is also important as well. So
Mm.
the additional information that's required is really quite small, and it's quite a small addition in financial terms to add an MCI to an EPD as a result of that, which is,
Mm.
I think, partly why we've seen such a good uptake and a growing uptake of the MCI within those EPDs.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. So that leads us to this second question: how to get an EPD for our circular biz? Well, I'll just jump in and say, well, we can suggest, that tool that Jim mentioned on the ThinkStep website is a bit of a start to get an indicator of where you might be. Um, and if you want to go into more detail, contact us at EPD Australasia. We can put you in contact with some people who can help develop that further and maybe incorporate that into an EPD. So that's part of what we do is refer you to the consultants and specialists in this area who can help you for your biz. I think you've answered question three there. Maybe a question for David there, or no, sorry, another question for Jim. What material types in construction is seeing the strongest demand for MCI calculations?
Yeah, so I mean, do you want me to share screen briefly to show what's been
Yeah, if you could,
published?
yeah.
I'll share. I've just got a quick graphic I can show. So if I just share this one, can you see this?
I stop share. You
Yes.
can see. Yeah,
Can,
yeah,
fantastic. So this is just a little graphic that shows the results of MCIs that have been published within EPDs by material class. So you can see, steel and some of David's MCI results there. Similar ones for MDF and particle board, asphalt and insulation. So we're seeing the materials that are being declared at the moment are mostly sort of primary materials rather than manufactured products. The the products on the right in the red dots are self-declared examples of MCIs and things that have been declared by businesses on their websites. So things like furniture and coffee machines, pumps for water, some sources of packaging are starting to creep through as self-declared values as well. The MCI, I should say, is something that applies to materials as well as to products. It's fairly easy to apply it to more complex products with multiple materials from different sources. Um, but at the moment, the majority of the declarations we're seeing are for materials rather than manufactured products. But that's something I would expect to change as adoption becomes a bit more mature.
yeah, right. And so, David, are you seeing any demand for this MCI indicator?
Yes, it's coming through. As I said, it's come through by virtue of the IS rating tool, which is fantastic. And I think to echo that, it's particularly the major materials in infrastructure projects, which is obviously concrete and
Mm.
steel, where the most interest is being generated now. But I expect that to transition through more and more widely in both the Green Star tool, if and when that gets taken up, right through to other products that go into into the built environment.
Yeah, right. Okay. Um, just going back to a question that Sonia asked, which seems to have disappeared. Okay.
I think I disappeared it, David, but I can answer it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I hit live instead of the response. I responded to Sonia a
Okay.
bit further
Uh,
down there, but it's about
yeah,
circularity of the product. So we've got a formal network to take our red tag bowls and those products that we sort of do the artisan way via Australia Post back to us. We've got informal sort of ways for all our other products. So if you can get them back to us, we definitely recycle them. But we've got to come up with formal networks to get those products coming out into the market back to us. With bar chairs, they're going to be in the concrete infrastructure for however long and will be recycled as an aggregate. We're also working on the Resonate to have test results showing you that that can just go straight into a recycled aggregate uh, pathway. And the wheel stops will take them all back. So really, we're working with the where they go to and their end of life expectations. And we're also offering a product as a service where we'll lease the wheel stops and take them back. So a good one for temporary works for tier ones and other people who will put something down for 6 months or 12 months and then have to rip it up later as part of the project. We offer the wheel stops in that regard that we'll lease them for the period and then take them back after that, so you don't have to worry about the disposal aspect.
Okay. Oh, that's really good. Yeah, so David, I think you've answered some questions there online, so they're
Mm.
disappearing. It's just great. Um, an answer to Melissa, yes, our presentation will definitely be shared, as will the recording, to all registrants. So that's an answer to that question there. Um, Sonia's saying thank you very much. Um, okay, there's a question here. How can secondary fuels, renewable, non-renewable, can be used as an input for circularity calculations? Um, yeah, good question. I think you've stumped me there. We've got our technical manager, advisor, Andrew Moore on the line. I'm not sure if he can jump in there, if I give him permission. Yeah, I'm not sure quite how to do that, but we'll get back to you
All
about
right,
that one.
or I can have a go at that if you want
Oh,
to.
yeah, Jim? Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think essentially it depends on the scope of your evaluation and whether fuels are included as part of your material flow. So for many products they won't be, or yeah, in some cases they will. So I think whether you include those as part of your material flow is down to the overall scope and keeping that consistent with the scope of your EPD. Steve had that question on screen earlier in terms of consistency and comparability between different results, and keeping the scope of the assessment consistent according to
Hmm.
product category rules. And yeah, the EPDs are very useful in that respect because they do provide those product category rules, which the MCI also needs to follow. Um,
Hmm.
Along with the requirements of ISO 59020, which governs the actual application of circularity metrics. So there's nothing to stop you from including secondary fuels as part of that assessment if it's part of your scope. If it isn't part of your scope, then it forms part of a separate assessment. But it is still
Hmm.
something that you can apply the circularity indicators to, whether as part of your EPD or separately as a different evaluation.
Hmm. Thanks for jumping in there, Jim.
No problem.
Appreciate that. And good mention of the product category rules, which are a bedrock of the EPD system, which specify what the scope of the EPD should be. And previous presenters have actually users of EPD have noted quite strongly that they find the process diagrams and how stuff happens really useful part of an EPD. I think Brad, you cited that in your presentation about the transparency of your production and your supply chain, and you found that a very useful aspect uh, to communicate to the market.
Yeah, it authenticates a lot of what you're saying in your media and your presentations and everything else. So you know that someone else has come in, done a full audit. Same with Geeka. You know, you've had two parties come through, audit your organization, and basically say, you know, there's no greenwashing. This is what you're doing. This is where we've got it, and we've actually been there and seen it. So it's good.
Yeah. David, did you want to add anything there?
No, all good. Thank you, though.
Okay. Oh, okay. We've got a question there to transmutation. Read that you're having issues. Well, okay, with Dulux powder coating, transportation. Anything you can share?
Yes, I am. Thank you for leading leading that one in. So yeah, currently the the rules and regulations from an EPA perspective make it very difficult for us to recycle things. Just in this case, you know, there's probably other cases where that's not true, but um, by classifying our new raw material, which is the waste from Dulux powder coating factory as a waste, it comes under all sorts of different regulations where if it's a raw material, which it clearly is for me in my process, it doesn't. So
Mhm.
basically, from a terminology point of view, one route makes all sorts of difficulties and makes the path to recycling extremely difficult. and the other path by calling it what it is to me now, which is not a waste material but a raw material into my process. All that goes
Hmm.
away. It's as simple as that. So it's that sort of bureaucratic stuff that we need to now work through to make recycling easier. It's got nothing to do with safety or environmental protection or anything like that. It's simply a terminology that now doesn't fit, and makes it extremely hard for me to do the right thing. So it's sort of stopping
Yeah.
at the moment that pathway to recycling. Well, what we're doing, we're going to work around it in the short term anyway, and potentially do all of the what I do at a different location back in the Dulux location itself. So it doesn't actually have to leave the facility. But I mean, that's us working
Mm.
around, a simple change in terminology. So
Yeah. Well, I think your side of the problem where we're going from a linear waste disposal solution, which is why those regulations were enacted, to
yeah,
becoming more circular, and some of the challenges there you've just illustrated to get the regulations
I think
on board.
yeah, look, I actually think it's a very good question because the world moves a lot quicker now than it definitely used to. But it's the speed of the bureaucracy. I don't blame the system and the rules. We know why they're there and how they came about. But how we identify the changes and change that regulation and bureaucracy needs to happen so much quicker than it does now. We're being left behind.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think European, I don't know, Jim, if you've got anything there in European, that you've got an end of waste sort of regulations, which is a bit of a different mindset.
Yeah, so the from a European perspective, the landscape, particularly from the regulatory perspective, is much more developed and rapidly developing further. Um, the one thing I would say is it does, we can't really treat Europe as a silo. It does affect Australian products as well. So things like the Eco Design for Sustainable Products regulation, they always choose to have things that are quite a mouthful to pronounce. Um, will impact anything that Australia exports to Europe as well, and that brings with it requirements for digital transparency in terms of the sustainability and circularity of those products that are put on the European market. So
Mm.
there is a need for Australian manufacturers to be able to provide that type of information if they're exporting to Europe, because it will be linked to market access. If you don't have that data available on your product, you won't be able to place it on the market. Um, Similarly, they have things like the Green Claims Directive that's coming through, which means that if you do attach that information to your product, it better be right. Otherwise, you'll be liable directly for making misleading claims. So all of this is kind of pointing towards the need for greater traceability and robust data around the sustainability and circularity of your products as part of that transition. It also goes the other way. If there are European products that are being exported to the Australian market, increasingly those products are going to have this data associated with them as well. And that data will be available to Australian consumers, which raises the question of where the Australian comparison is. So it's important, even for us, an Australian market, to have that information coming through.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, it's a good. We're all connected, really. Well, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for everyone attending today, and thank our presenters today. I think have done a bang up job um, on the topic. Just as a reiterate, the recording will be available to everyone who's registered. A CPD certificate is available on request for Green Star accredited professionals and other professionals who've attended today. Just a heads up, we'll be at GBCA Transform 18th and 19th of March in Sydney. You can get a discount if you use that code there on tickets. So we'd love to see you there. I think David will be coming as well.
Indeed.
He'll be there. So you've got the opportunity to talk to him and myself. Questions and support, our website or that email address. And for our New Zealand attendees today, we'll be coming to Auckland on the 16th of April. We'll be doing a half-day conference together with the Life Cycle Assessment Society of New Zealand on the 16th of April in Auckland, communicating LCA and EPD results. So Love to see you there. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time.